The silence in my house had a weight to it. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, pressing down on me, a constant reminder of how empty my life had become. My name is Charlotte. At 45, my world had shrunk to the four walls of a suburban home that felt more like a museum of a life I used to live. The divorce from Richard 3 years ago had been the first crack in the foundation, and losing my job as a graphic designer 6 months back felt like the final tremor that brought the whole structure down. Now, my days were a monotonous blur of online job boards and the low hum of the television, a sound that only seemed to amplify the loneliness. The rain outside matched the dreary landscape of my soul, streaking down the windows like tears. I was sitting at the kitchen island, a glass of cheap red wine in my hand, staring at a stack of bills that seemed to mock me with their bold, red, past-due stamps. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, a cold knot of fear. I was adrift, and I was sinking. That's when the back door creaked open, and a gust of damp, earthy air swirled in, carrying with it the scent of rain and motor oil. Liam, my stepson, he was 19, a man in all the ways that mattered, yet still carrying the last vestiges of boyhood in the occasional awkwardness of his smile, when Richard left, moving to the West Coast with a woman half my age. I'd been stunned when Liam announced he was staying with me to finish his last year of high school and start at the local community college. We weren't close. Not really. Our relationship had always been a series of polite greetings in the hallway and shared meals eaten in near silence. He was a good kid, quiet and intense, spending most of his time in the garage, lost in the guts of some engine. He was a phantom in my house, a reminder of a family that no longer existed. But tonight, the phantom felt real. He stood there for a moment, his dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain, his gray t-shirt clinging to the solid lines of his chest and shoulders. His eyes, a deep, thoughtful blue, scanned the mess of papers on the island, then lifted to my face. I probably looked a wreck. I felt like one. "Rough day?" he asked. His voice was deeper than I was used to, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. I tried to conjure a smile, but my face wouldn't cooperate. "You could say that," I murmured, gesturing vaguely at the bills. "Just the usual adult fun." Normally, this would be his cue to retreat, to grab a soda from the fridge and disappear back into his world. But he didn't move. He took a step closer, shrugging off his damp jacket and tossing it on a chair. The simple movement was filled with a casual yet unconscious grace that made me catch my breath. He was no longer the lanky teenager I remembered. He was built, solid. The hours spent hauling engines and wrestling with tires had chiseled him into something powerful. "It's more than that, isn't it?" he said, his gaze steady and unnervingly perceptive. He pulled up a stool opposite me, the space between us suddenly feeling charged, intimate. And for some reason, the dam I had so carefully constructed inside me finally broke. Maybe it was the wine or the rain, or the simple, unexpected kindness in his eyes. But I told him everything. I told him about the severance pay running out, the leaky roof I couldn't afford to fix, the gnawing fear that I was going to lose the house, the only thing I had left. The words tumbled out of me, a messy, tear-choked confession. Through it all, Liam just listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. He just held my gaze, his expression serious, his presence a silent, solid anchor in my storm. When I finally ran out of words, sputtering into a humiliated silence, I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "I'm sorry," I whispered, shaking my head. "That was a lot. You don't need to hear all my problems." He was quiet for a long moment. "We're a team, aren't we?" he said softly. "We're supposed to help each other." I let out a weak, watery laugh. "Thanks, sweetie. But I don't think your part-time pay from the garage is going to solve this." "Maybe not," he said, his eyes darkening a shade. "But I can help. Let me help you. Charlotte." The way he said my name, no longer with the hesitant formality of a stepson, but with a low, deliberate intensity, sent a strange shiver down my spine. It was a promise, and it sounded like something more than just fixing a leak. It sounded dangerous. It sounded like everything I needed. "Before you go on, I just want to take a moment and ask you to hit that subscribe button. If my stories speak to that hidden part of you, the part that craves a little escape, then you're in the right place. Join our little community of late-night listeners. The next morning, I woke to a rhythmic thump, 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 coming from above. My heart lurched. I threw on a robe and hurried outside into the misty morning air. There he was, perched on the steep pitch of the roof, shirtless in the humid air, his back a landscape of smooth skin and defined muscle that flexed with every swing of the hammer. Dew clung to his hair, and beads of sweat were already trickling down his spine. I was about to yell at him to get down, to tell him it was too dangerous, but the words died in my throat. I just stood there on the damp grass, clutching my robe, watching him. He moved with a confident, fluid power that was utterly mesmerizing. He wasn't a boy playing handyman. He was a man, taming my broken house, and the sight of it stirred something deep inside me, something dormant and primal. He must have felt my eyes on him because he paused, looked down, and gave me a slow, knowing grin. "Morning," he called out. "Don't worry, I watched a few videos. It's under control." The leak was fixed by noon, but he didn't stop there. The rest of the week, Leah moved through the house like a force of nature. He fixed the rattling dryer, sealed the drafty windows in the living room, even replaced the flickering fluorescent light in the kitchen with a warmer, softer fixture. The house began to feel less like a tomb and more like a home, and with every repair, the space between us shrank. We were in constant proximity. I'd hand him a wrench and our fingers would brush, sending a jolt of static electricity through me. I'd bring him a glass of iced tea and find myself staring at the way his throat moved as he drank, the way a drop of condensation traced a path down his tanned skin. The silence between us was different now, too. It was no longer empty. It was thick with unspoken thoughts, with lingering glances and shared smiles. We started eating dinner together every night, not out of obligation, but because we wanted to. We'd talk for hours, about his dreams of opening his own custom auto body shop, about my old passion for painting that I'd let fall by the wayside. It felt like I was meeting him for the first time, and he was meeting me. Have you ever felt that spark with someone completely unexpected? That slow burn in a place you never thought you'd find it? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. One evening, I found him in the garage, hunched over a sputtering engine, his brow furrowed in concentration. His hands, usually stained with grease, were clean, but his knuckles were red and raw. "You're working too hard," I said softly from the doorway. He looked up, wiping a smear of oil from his cheek with the back of his hand. "It's got to get done." "Let me see your hands," I insisted, stepping into the garage. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline in him. I took his hand in mine. It was calloused and strong, but the skin was chapped and irritated. "Come inside," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I've got something for that." He followed me to the kitchen. I had him sit at the island while I retrieved a jar of heavy-duty moisturizing cream, the cane I use for my own dry hands in the winter. I took his hand again, my touch more deliberate this time. I squeezed a generous dollop of the cool cream onto his palm and began to work it into his skin. I massaged his palms, his knuckles, each of his fingers, slowly, methodically. His hand was so warm, so large in mine. The air grew still and heavy around us. I could hear his breathing. A little faster now, a little rougher. I kept my eyes down, focused on my task, but I could feel his gaze on me, hot and intense. When I was done with one hand, I reached for the other. He didn't pull away. He let me tend to him, his silence a form of surrender. My fingers moved over his skin, tracing the lines and calluses, learning the texture of him. It was the most intimate thing I had done in years. The simple act of rubbing lotion on his hands felt more charged, more forbidden than anything I had ever shared with my ex-husband. When I finished, I didn't let go right away. I held his hands in mine for a long moment, our thumbs brushing. "Thank you," he said, his voice husky. I finally lifted my eyes to his. The blue of his irises was dark, stormy, like a turbulent sea, and in their depths, I saw it. The same hunger, the same forbidden longing that was clawing its way up my own throat. He knew, and he knew that I knew. The unspoken thing that had been growing between us was finally out in the open, hanging in the supercharged air. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, the feel of his hand still burning on my skin. I felt ashamed, guilty, and more alive than I had felt in a decade. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. But the cold, empty alternative was a loneliness so profound, I wasn't sure I could survive it anymore. A week later, a thunderstorm rolled in, the kind that rattles the windows and makes the lights flicker. Liam and I were in the living room, watching a movie. A comfortable silence settled between us on the couch. Then, with a loud crack of thunder, the house was plunged into darkness. I gasped, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. Well, so much for the movie? In the dark, his presence felt magnified. I could hear him shifting next to me, feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'll grab some candles," he said, his voice a low murmur right beside my ear. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. The darkness was absolute, disorienting. He returned a few minutes later, the soft, flickering glow of a single candle illuminating his face, casting dramatic shadows that made his features seem carved from stone. He placed the candle on the coffee table and sat back down. Closer this time, so close I could feel the warmth of his thigh pressed against mine through my thin pajama pants. We sat in silence, watching the flame dance. The storm raged outside, a wild, chaotic symphony that mirrored the tempest inside me. "Charlotte," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I turned my head to look at him. In the flickering candlelight, his eyes were pools of darkness, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite name, but that made my breath catch. He raised his hand, the one I had held and soothed, and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers grazed the sensitive skin of my neck, and a wildfire erupted along my nerves. It wasn't a boy's touch, it was a man's knowing, deliberate and full of question. He didn't need to ask it. The answer was in the way I leaned into his touch, the way my eyes fluttered shut. This was wrong. A voice screamed it in the back of my mind. He was my stepson, my ex-husband's child, but Richard was a ghost, a memory from another life. This man, this warm, solid presence beside me in the dark, was real, and he was here. He was saving me. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I met him halfway. The first kiss was soft, tentative, a question. It was the taste of rain and youth and something forbidden and sweet. Then, as the thunder cracked outside again, the kiss deepened. It was no longer a question, but an answer, a statement. His other hand came up to cup my face, his thumb stroking my cheekbone. My hands found their way to his chest, feeling the frantic, powerful beat of his heart beneath my palms, a rhythm that matched my own. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his breath warm on my lips. "Are you sure?" he rasped. I didn't answer with words. I answered by pulling him closer, my mouth finding his again in the dark. The guilt, the shame, the fear, it all dissolved in the searing heat of that moment. There was no past, no future. There was only the storm outside and the storm inside, and the incredible, impossible feeling of his lips on mine. He guided me back against the cushions of the couch, his body covering mine. It wasn't rough or rushed. It was a slow, deliberate exploration. His hands roamed from my face, down my neck, over my shoulders, learning the shape of me. His mouth left mine to trail a line of fire down my jaw, to the hollow of my throat. A gasp escaped my lips. Half surprise, half surrender. Every touch was a revelation, awakening parts of me I thought were long dead. I felt his fingers tangle in my hair as his mouth returned to mine. More demanding this time, a raw expression of the pent-up longing we had both been denying for weeks. In the flickering candlelight, in the heart of the storm, I gave in. I let myself be saved. Not from financial ruin, not from a leaky roof, but from the crushing, soul-deep loneliness that had been my life. It was reckless. It was forbidden. And in that moment, it was everything. We didn't talk about it the next day. There were no words for what had happened. Instead, a new kind of intimacy settled between us, a shared secret that bound us closer than any legal document or spoken promise ever could. We moved around the house with a new awareness of each other, our bodies like magnets, always finding an excuse to be near, to touch. A hand on the small of my back as I reached for something in the cupboard, his leg brushing against mine under the dinner table. These small, secret touches were our new language. The house was no longer empty. It was filled with a humming, vibrant energy. My life was no longer a void. He had filled it. Liam, my stepson, my savior, my beautiful forbidden secret. A year has passed. I have a new job now, working from home for a small marketing firm. The bills are paid. The house is quiet and solid, but it's the other changes that matter. Liam is still here. He's taking classes and still working at the garage, saving up to open his own shop one day. To the outside world, we are the same. A devoted stepmother and her quiet, hard-working stepson. They see a woman who is lucky to have a kind young man help her through a tough time. They don't see the way he looks at me when we're alone. They don't see the way my hand finds his in the darkness of a movie theater. They don't hear the whispered conversations late at night when the rest of the world is asleep. I used to believe that love and family had to fit into neat, tidy boxes. I believed in rules and boundaries. But what do you do when the person who single-handedly rebuilds your world and rescues your heart is the one person you're not supposed to love? You learn that some connections defy definition. You learn that sometimes the greatest solace is found in the most forbidden places. It's not a simple story of right and wrong. It's a story of two lost souls finding an anchor in each other during a storm. And maybe, just maybe, that's a kind of love all its own. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new confession. Share this story with someone you think might understand, and let me know in the comments. What story should I tell next until next time? Stay curious.